of the board of directors for the Mill Valley
Can you film while I talk for 2 minutes?
Oh my God.
About 14 years.
Have to push anything?
Now it's rolling.
Okay.
So Tim has been in on this project since the very beginning.
You want to get closer?
Jill. Is Betty Girk here?
This is good.
There's Betty. Great. Betty, almost 10 years ago to the day, you and I and the Historical Society were down with a group of Miwok Indians as we laid down the plaque for Chief Marin, just a block up from Locust. I'm not sure if you're aware, it was exactly 10 years ago. And here we are again today, the Mill Valley Historical Society, with the help of Betty Girk and all the board members, are laying down another piece of history that's here forever. As I mentioned, Chief Miwok, or the Miwoks, I wanted to point out, hey, Greg. Think back to 1776, before the Spanish arrived. This area, which we know today as Mill Valley, was known by the local tribe as Animus. So put that in your knowledge bank for the next time you had a coffee party, what they call it, cocktail party. Animus. And it was that until the Spanish arrived. And when the Spanish arrived, late 1700s, 10, 20 years passed, and in those 10, 20 years that passed, almost all the Miwok that were in this area either relocated to the missions or moved inland or died from diseases. So by the time it was the early 1800s, there was almost nobody in this area. And so I'm thinking about the hiking that went on. Was a map needed in 1800? Probably not. Was a map needed for the Miwoks? I wonder, did they even exercise? Did they hike Mount Tem recreationally? Did they need a map to get to the top or to get to Stinson Beach?
They didn't.
It was the late 1800s when Mill Valley was formed as a town. 1890 they officially started selling off lots. And by the turn of the century, the turn of the 1900s, hiking had become huge in the Bay Area. And Mill Valley and Mount Tam was the mecca for a lot of hiking that went on in California, Northern California, and the Bay Area. Many years passed with the Mountain Railroad making it even bigger, even more popular. And it was just after World War II when Trans Fix-It Shop at that time, right now there are condominiums at the catty corner of Old Mill Park, and most of you know, but for those of you that don't know where this was, it was right at the corner of Throckmorton, and what's the name of that street?
Old Mill.
Old Mill.
Little street.
Directly across the street from Old Mill School and Old Mill Park. It's condominiums today, but until 2003, it was a fix-it shop, and before that, it was a market. And it was the market in the mid 1940s, just after World War II, that the owner put up this map as a way of making it easy to tell all the people that were passing through his store, saying, how do we get to Mirror Woods? How do we get to Mount Tam? How do we get to the dam back in Cascade Canyon? And so he put this up as a way of, as the legend goes, as a way of making it easier for people to get around. The lifespan of this map was no more than 15 years. By the late 50s, early 60s, it was covered by shingles. And for the locals that grew up here, like CJ and a couple of timers, they may have remembered that map. But my guess is that years went by, they probably forgot it was even there. You know, within 5-10 years, you forget what was at the corner of that store. What was there before? I don't know. So it wasn't until 2003 when the owner of that fix-it shop in that little corner sold the property, and they were going to develop it into the condominiums that is today. And CJ, just raise your hand real quick, because this guy is the key to the whole thing happening. As his story goes, he was just tinkering around with the shingles that were there, and
On the edge.
and what?
Well, let me tell you.
He's just going to say that story.
Yeah,
This is what happened around 2003.
Can you all hear me? Yeah. So I think we were down there with the Boy Scouts doing something, and I saw the edge of the map, okay, under those shingles, and they were the kind of asbestos concrete ones. So I pulled a couple off, and lo and behold, I said, "Oh my Lord, look at that! Isn't that neat?" And all the Boy Scouts were there said, "That is really cool," you know. And so, long story short, they were gonna tear the building down. I got in touch with the owners at the time, the development company, got permission, got permission to take it off. Got a couple of people, and Tim will tell you about that. David Hodge and
Jim
Stevenson, and probably a couple of others that I can't remember, but we thank you. Got visited by the fire department No, fire department twice, police once. Because as people drove by, they said, uh-oh, asbestos, right? And that was at the height of all of this foolishness. So at first, a pickup truck came by with a nice fire person, and they came out and interrogated me about what I was doing, and I explained to them, you know, and there's not really that much shingles, and if you were a kid, you got more asbestos dust helping your dad change the brakes than anything that I'm doing, because I was just using my Sawzall, and you could see where there were some cuts, and my Wonder Bar, trying to be careful, take it off. Well, okay. Then a little bit later, a police car came, because somebody else complained, and we went through the whole procedure again. And they said, just get off the wall, would you? Because we're getting all these calls. Well, finally, in the late afternoon, a fire truck, a big fire truck, showed up with a couple of people. Again, there was concern, and they were doing the right thing, responding to the citizens. And by then, I had most of it down. And you can see the picture, kind of get an idea. That is plywood that covered it up, but there were all those shingles there. Cut it up, took it home, put it in my garage for a while. Tim and I were working, said, hey, let's find a place for this. Yeah, okay, you keep it in your garage for a couple of months, we'll do it, right? That didn't happen. Then I put it in my storage unit, one of my storage units up in San Rafael, and year after year, 10 years, they kept saying, well, we'll find a place, we'll find a place. And then finally Tim found a very nice gentleman who was up on the roof, I think, just a bit ago.
Guy Palmer, where's Guy?
And I'll get out of the way. Yeah, I put it in the back of my van and carried it up to his house, and the rest is Tim's. And thank you for indulging me.
Thank you, CJ, again. I'll fill in a couple of details that CJ didn't mention that happened around that time and shortly after. I really need to point out that it was he and David Hodge and the president of the Historical Society at that time's husband, Jim Stevenson, were the big three people that were there with the crowbars and hammers that took it down. Is Jim here?
Yeah. Hi, Jim.
Stevenson, there he is. Jim Stevenson there. David Hodge has passed away, but his wife, I believe, is here to represent the family. There's Mrs. Hodge. And so also a big thanks to Joan for making this a project of the Historical Society. So CJ had said, great, we'll take it down. And you could have said, great, CJ, that's your project. Get away from us. But no, CJ's wife, Donna Carrillo, was also on the board. And Joan's enthusiasm and encouragement kept it alive. And at that time, we took a picture. We took a high-resolution picture. That's what this is. Because we kind of thought that this will never survive. It's so old. It's so rotted. We'll take a picture, and one day we might amplify that picture and put it somewhere in town. And that's actually where we got to in 2010. That's what was going to happen. But some other people within the Historical Society got a little more ambitious and said, well, why don't we put that wood up there? Why don't we see what can happen? And what would happen was almost going back to point A. We lost the permission from the city where it was going to be. We almost had to start anew. And this is where I kind of stepped off the train, and then Jill and Pam stepped on the train and finished the project. I also want to mention Beth Coker was involved. Is Beth Coker here? She was one of the first people that Joan assigned to see where it could have a home. And Beth was one of the first people, well, let's try here, let's try here. No, 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 no.
And Barbara Ford helped.
Barbara Ford is also. Barbara, raise your hand. Barbara was there with CJ and David.
She was the recorder. As I cut a piece off, she had a picture, you know, made a rough map, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that when we've got to restore, they can follow it, and we thank you so much for that.
She logged every piece so that it was able to put back together. It wouldn't be like one of those jigsaw puzzles you throw into a shoebox and you never know how to put that thing back together again. And so with that, let me pass it back on to Jill. Jill, you can add on the last couple of years you were really involved in. So tell us what happened in the last 2 years and how you finally got, got Stephanie and the city council to say, great, do it.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you, Tim. So when I took on the project, we were going to put it in Old Mill Park because we thought that would be a nice location because it was so close to the original location. But we were denied permission, and it did make sense. The city planning commission felt like it was too damp, it was too dark, it would get damaged like the gravity car that had been there did, and that it wasn't able to be well policed because our lovely children of Mill Valley actually do paint graffiti on things. So we kind of went back to square one and walked around town and looked for another place and saw this big blank wall with sunny exposure, and that was when I contacted the building owner, and he said, that sounds great. And so the rest is history. Helen and Nika were in favor of it too, and so we got to move forward. And we had it restored, and then Guy Palmer put it up. We also had a structural engineer who donated his time. His name's Kelly Turbin. I don't think Kelly's not here, I don't see him. So I will hand it over to Jessica, Councilmember Jessica Sloan, to say a few words.